Hello, I'm Professor Cafiero, and I welcome you to our very first lecture in the series Art Appreciation Introduction to Humanities. Our topic for today, for this first lecture, is going to be a fundamental question. Why do humans make art? It's not primarily a course about memorizing lists of painters and dates, figuring out schools of interpretation or ways to organize things or classify them. At its most basic, fine art appreciation is about learning to think creatively and critically about what we see. You already respond to images, to music, to architecture, buildings, movies, clothes, advertisements, to design every day. The goal of this lecture series is to get better at noticing what those things are doing. What is the intention of different types of art, and how do we respond? Now, a critical element of this noticing, this heightened awareness of what we're seeing, is always reaching for an authentic response. Our goal is to be honest about what we see, how it makes us feel, and how we choose to respond. In other words, don't look up the right answer or ask AI to interpret things for you. If my question to you is, how does this piece make you feel? The only way to get that question wrong is to give me somebody else's answer instead of your own. So I want you to think about that, and I want you to think about this authentic human response. Go for personal more than perfect. The goal here is that our responses have actual human value. That puts the human in humanities. Now, speaking of humans, we have this really strange habit. Lots of animals make things. Bees make beehives, beavers make dams. Birds make nests, so do rats. What makes humans really unique among the animals is that we make a lot of things that we don't need, that aren't strictly connected to some kind of survival or mating and propagating the species. We're not trying to attract partners. We're not, well, sometimes we are. Art has more than one job. But the idea is that we make things simply because we find them beautiful or that they add value to our lives. Before museums, galleries, art schools, before writing, people shaped objects and made images. The first image we're going to look at is called the Venus of Willendorf. And here she is. Now, the Venus of Willendorf is named for Venus, because that's what we call it, the Roman goddess of love, but its makers certainly did not use that term. We know this because the Venus of Willendorf is a sculpture that is approximately 30,000 years old, about 28,000 BCE. And Willendorf simply comes from the name of the town in Germany where they were digging when they found it. Clearly, the Willendorf Venus represents a human figure, a female human figure, to be more precise. We don't know who it is or why it was made. Is it a fertility figure, sort of good luck charm? Self-representation? Is it a portrait? A religious object? Something else? There's a joke in anthropology and archaeology that any object that an archaeologist can't figure out its purpose is labeled a religious or ceremonial object, because those don't need any explanation or definition. I'm not going to try to explain Venus of Willendorf. I'm just going to give you some time to consider. Note the physical attributes that are present. Hair is incredibly detailed, showing off a woven pattern. This person who's represented here took care of their personal appearance. Obviously, female aspects are exaggerated. Is this to do with fertility and childbearing? Is it an aesthetic goal? Is it just, boy, I think this girl is hot? Is it, hey, look, I carved my mom? We don't know. And looking carefully is different from pretending that we know. I want you to keep the Willendorf Venus in mind as we go through these courses. She may be our oldest work of art that we'll consider in this course, but she's certainly far from alone. And all of the questions we just asked about her creation, her purpose, what we know or don't know about her creator, all of these are questions that apply to every work of art that we'll consider. Speaking of older works of art that we're going to consider, there is a series of caves in France called Lascaux, the Lascaux Caves, one of which particularly is very famous. It's called the Hall of the Bulls. And it's called this because about 17,000 years ago, humans, anatomically, intellectually, artistically, very much like us, lacking written language, lacking the ability to tell us our story and tell us their story in any other way, they went into this cave and they created a series of magnificent images on the walls. These are the bulls of the Lascaux Caves. Why animals? Why these animals? Why here? Why spend time and materials making these? Who was supposed to see them? I want you to ask yourself, what changes when a human being looks at an animal and decides not just to see it, but to represent it? Okay. I hope you noticed these aren't crude doodles. This isn't, it's primitive because it's 17,000 years old, not because the artist lacked skill or inspiration or creativity or ability. It's very clear that the people who created these artworks didn't just look at these animals. They saw, they noticed, they interpreted, and they responded through art. They weren't just primitive people waiting for civilization to come around. They had rich lives that expressed themselves through art. Notice, let me put the bowl back up here. Notice the composition, the sense of movement, the way even the walls of the cave and its irregularities figure into the artworks. Notice the technical skill. I have a degree in visual arts and performance from UT Dallas as an undergrad. My art didn't look like this, which may be why I don't do it for a living. This was a magnificent piece, and it was put on this wall in a cave away from the rain and the smoke of cooking fires and the random traffic of people and animals in a way that preserved it for thousands upon thousands of years. It was important. And just because we started in France and Germany, I don't want you to think this is a European story or a Western civilization story. Let me put up some petroglyphs. There we go. A petroglyph, petro from the Greek petros, meaning stone, and glyph, a letter, a marking, or writing, or drawing. Petroglyphs are simply drawings on stone. These are Aboriginal Australian rock art from sites like Kakudu, Ubir, or Murujuga. The native peoples of Australia, Tasmania, and the surrounding islands still maintain these artistic traditions. They still make rock art and sand art and other types of art using local found materials in their environment. This is a continued, unbroken tradition that goes across tens of thousands of years into the present. And that continuity matters. These works aren't just archaeological curiosities. It's like, hey, I found this neat rock. It's an artist, like these artists working today over here, created this, and it's lasted for millennia. We are connected to a human tradition of making, and it exists in every place humans have lived or do live. We've made art in space. We've made art under the oceans. We've made art at the top of mountains. We've made art in jail cells. Art is a fundamental human activity. Now, it's easy for me to say that. I'm a professor. I can just point to my degree on the wall over there and say, I have a degree in museum studies. Let me tell you our art. But the question, what counts as art? A museum calls something art, but its maker may have understood it differently. There's a famous example of someone who was putting his artworks in a museum, and he dragged a chair from another room in to stand on and adjust something over his head. And then when he finished, he forgot the chair. The next day, when the museum opened, people came around, and art students go through museums and make sketches as part of their study. The man came back to his exhibit to kind of peek around and see how people were responding to his art. And he found 4 art students sitting on the floor sketching the chair, because they were looking at it as an artwork, at its shape, its color, its placement in the environment, all the things we do with art. So, are all of these things art? Who decides what art is? Does it have to be intentional? Does it become art when we put it in a museum? Can something be beautiful without being art? Can art be ugly? I don't expect you to have easy answers to these questions. The discussion is part of the course, and the argument is part of the human activity of critically and creatively engaging with the world around us and the artworks we respond to the world with. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's cool for museum people, but I don't see any connection to my life. Well, everything in your life that you interact with is designed, and design is a type of art. Your shoes are designed. Their color, their material, the patterns, the way they're advertised to you. Whether it's a new pair of Nikes or a beat up old pair of Crocs. If it's a pair of Converse that's coming apart at the seams because you just won't let them go. Those are all designed. Phone interfaces are designed. Album covers, TikTok videos, church architecture, stained glass windows. If you have a tattoo, that's a type of art. That tattoo was designed. Hairstyles are designed. Some worse than others. Murals, movie posters. If you play video games, 3D environments are designed. They don't just happen. And even a college dormitory involves design. Where do you plug in your phone? What do you put on the wall? Where do you put your dirty clothes? Where do you sleep? What colors do you use? These are design questions. They're aesthetic questions. Now, I'll throw a definition up here for you really quickly. I don't want you to get hung up on vocabulary, especially in this first lecture. I want things to be as straightforward as possible. So, aesthetic questions. This class is not about teaching you to admire things that I decide are important. I want you to ask through this series of lectures, what am I seeing? What is it doing? Why does it affect me? And what might it mean to somebody else? Now, thousands of years ago, somebody stood in a cave, picked up a material that could leave a mark, and decided that an image should exist where none had existed before. We can't ask that person why, but we can still see the mark they left behind. And we can ask ourselves, what does it mean to me? How do I respond? Art is one of the ways that human beings leave evidence that we were here, that we noticed the world, and that something mattered enough to make. I hope this brief introduction has been helpful, and I look forward to sharing more with you in the upcoming lectures. Have a great day, and thank you for your attention today.